When federal workers are treated unfairly, they file an appeal. But the appeal system is like this giant turtle, slow moving and injured. And we're witnessing an increase in workloads, crippling shortages, and changes to government policy that could impact how the government functions. Why is this happening now? The MSPB and the IRS are two pillars of our federal government, but now they're both buckling under pressure. The MSPB is the Merit Systems Protection Board. So it's like a federal court for employees. If you feel like you've been treated unfairly, maybe you got a demotion, you were disciplined when you really didn't do anything wrong, you can file an appeal and then you could have your case reviewed by an administrative judge. They would decide whether or not your federal agency actually followed the rules. But here's the problem. Since President Trump took office earlier this year, the MSPB has seen a surge of appeals. Let's look at the numbers. So if you go back to the final months of 2024, on an average week, we're looking at 96 appeals. This year, an average week is over 400 appeals. It's almost a 400% increase compared to last year. Check this chart out. You see that blue line and where it spikes upward? That's when Trump took office in January this year. So the peak was in February, and it's only slightly above average right now. Why the surge? Well, if you look at this time period, this is right around the time that the Trump administration started the probationary purge. And what we're seeing is in 2 months in 2025, just 2 months, there's been more appeals than the entire year of 2024. And at surface level, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because you're thinking about the probationary federal workers, they don't have the same civil service protections. They don't have the same appeal protections or appeal rights. But you can still appeal if you believe your agency didn't follow proper procedure. If you believe your firings came from some sort of political effort. If you believe that was the case, just look at some of the termination notices, the layoff notices that mention performance, that mention subpar performance, which would be fine if it were true, but it was later discovered that the majority of them were not true. Unfortunately, if you're planning to appeal this month or maybe next month, you could easily have 10,000 people ahead of you. So this could take months, if not years. Do you have that kind of time available? What are you going to be doing in the meantime? The wait alone, the fact that it's going to take so long to hear anything back, that has discouraged a lot of federal employees from filing in the first place. And it's not just about the appeal numbers. To make things worse, the MSPB just so happens to be critically understaffed. If you look in 2018, look at the staffing numbers. They had 214 full-time employees. That's a lot more than they have today. Right now, they're sitting at 174, and they're projected to fall even further. That's a 20% in staffing over 7 years. So as the cases have increased, the staffing has decreased. You know what this sounds like? This sounds a whole lot like the Social Security Administration. Record low staffing, and you got a whole bunch of people that you need to service, that you need to provide some level of service to. Suzanne, general counsel for the Legal Defense Project, said MSPB was not designed to handle a wholesale winding down of the federal government. Another issue is that some of these appeals are stuck because of an injunction in court. So there's no progress to be made right now. And the MSPB is struggling, as we mentioned earlier, with their current workload. It's only going to get worse in the near future. But there's another problem. There's a third problem. They don't have a quorum. The MSPB has a 3-member board that makes final decisions on certain cases. But right now they only have 1 member. So out of 3, you have 1, and that's Henry. Henry's there holding it all down. So what happened to the other 2? Well, 1 was fired directly by President Trump. She was a Democrat. She sued, got it reinstated, but ultimately the Supreme Court ruled that she was fired, so she left. The other individual, which was Raymond left in February because Raymond saw the writing on the wall. Raymond figured it out. He could read the room. He realized this was not a safe environment for him, so he left. Because they don't have a quorum, They cannot finalize petitions for review, so that leaves hundreds of cases in limbo. There's some hope, though. Recently, the Senate advanced Trump's nominee James Woodruff II to fill one of the vacant board seats. If confirmed, the MSPB should be able to reach a quorum once again. But that doesn't take away from the fact that they're understaffed, they're underfunded, and they're overwhelmed right now. So you being a federal worker, or maybe you know a federal worker, why would you want to file an appeal to begin with? It could be adverse actions, performance-based removals, whistleblower retaliation, retirement-related issues, veteran preference violations, and prohibited personnel practices. You have to file your appeal within 30 days of a personnel action or of receiving a decision letter. You should file your appeal online on e-appeal. The judge is supposed to issue an initial decision within about 120 days of your appeal, but it's taken a lot longer these days. Now, what usually ends up happening is about 80% of the time, the federal agency wins. About 5% of the time, you win. And the other 15% or so, there will be some sort of settlement that gets reached. So the vast majority of appeals, they're not won by the federal employee. And this is one of the reasons why we heard in the One Big Beautiful Bill, they were trying to place a cost. Every time that you file an appeal, they wanted it to cost you money. Right now, it doesn't cost you money. You can file an appeal, $0. They wanted to make it like $350 per filing. And then if you won, you got the money back. Now, a lot of people said that would discourage people from filing in the first place, even if there's merit to your case. But that language was removed from the bill. So you can still file right now for free. And it's not just the MSPB that is in trouble. We have another agency, the IRS. The Internal Revenue Service is in trouble because the bill that we just referenced, the One Big Beautiful Bill, that had a lot of tax changes to it. So we have employees within the IRS that need to get smart. They need to get trained up on how to respond for this upcoming tax season. They need to implement major tax code changes with a shrinking workforce. Not only does this bill have a lot of tax cuts, but there are tax inclusions, like the EV stuff, the electrical vehicle. There was like a $7,500 rebate that you got back. There was like a tax credit. You buy an EV. I think you still can do it all the way up until September. You buy an EV and you get $7,500. That was like a tax credit. So that's out the window. There's some other ones that are out the window. But the reason why this is of concern to the workforce of the IRS is, number one, the agency has to retrain staff, update their IT systems, and handle a flood of taxpayer questions. This has to happen at the same time the agency has decided to cut 27% of their IT staff and 22% of their taxpayer service staff. Now, the Treasury Department says without new hires, the IRS will only answer 16% of calls during the 2026 season and just 11% in fiscal 2026. Aaron Collins, a national taxpayer advocate, said that with the major changes to these laws and a smaller workforce, taxpayers could face delays in processing returns and getting refunds. She referenced the 1985 filing season as a cautionary tale. So in 1985, the IRS was making a transition. It was going from paper, and they were starting to include more of a digital approach. They were trying to use computers. They were trying to do it electronically. So because the systems were not ready, it caused a huge headache for people that were trying to get tax refunds, for people that were trying to process their tax returns. So you had millions of people that had to wait additional months because they were not ready to go. She says, it is essential for taxpayers and the nation that the IRS not repeat the mistakes of the 1985 filing season. But it's not just the workload. Morale's taking a big hit because the Trump administration has made it their mission to reduce the federal workforce and to do it in a somewhat aggressive and chaotic way, to say the least. But when it comes to the IRS and the education department, they definitely have a target on their back. I've known many people that work in the IRS that quit during the first quarter of this year, the first 3 months, because they knew how President Trump felt about the IRS. The same thing with the education department. These individuals that are working for these agencies, sometimes they had a passion, sometimes they just wanted to do accounting. They wanted to do accounting and maybe their dad worked at the IRS or their grandfather worked at the IRS, and that's one of the reasons that drove them to go and get a job. Some people got it because they were in university and it was an internship opportunity, so they jumped at it. But pretty much overnight, the flick of a light switch, these individuals thought they were doing something good for the country, and then now it seems like a lot of these federal workers were labeled as fraud, waste, and abuse. Like why stay in the agency at that point? So I think that's why we've seen an exodus of people leaving certain agencies. Now, in addition to this, we have tens of thousands of federal workers that should have received a pay raise, but they didn't. They didn't receive it this month. They probably will not receive it next month. And these are individuals under FWS, the federal wage system. And they usually see a pay raise during the summer months, but it hasn't been happening. If you want to know more about that, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.